question, Sheikh?
Yeah, I heard it. I heard your question. So, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. When I first heard about the incident in New Zealand, I mean, I'm no stranger to, violence. I grew up in a violent environment, to some degree. So I can't say that, I was filled with all of these, emotions. I can honestly say that seeing this happen, I had to say that, just being saddened for, the families who, their fathers, their uncles, grandfathers, the children that went to Jumu'ah, like this was a situation where, it was unprecedented. Nobody was, could prepare for something like that. And as, before we got on, I'm, kind of cleaning my dining room up a little bit so I can get ready for the talk. And my children are outside playing, riding their bikes and playing football. And I'm thinking to myself of how, how blessed my children are that I went to Jumu'ah on Friday and came back, and Sunday my children are outside playing and I'm enjoying, my family time. And, the family members that lost their family members during Jumu'ah, they don't have that luxury. So it just kind of makes me, really grateful, on one end, and, saddened on the other end that, people lost their family members, man, lost their loved ones, in a senseless, act of violence, man. You know what I mean? But, the khutbah that I gave Friday, and believe it or not, I had absolutely no intentions on speaking about the incident during Jumu'ah simply because it just happened too fast. And, I have to mentally prepare to speak about something. I can't just on the spot, like I'm an introvert, so it takes me time to process stuff. And I had absolutely no intention on speaking about this during Jumu'ah. However, on my way to Jumu'ah, I usually, if I didn't have time to prepare something, I just choose something that I did before. And I'm going through my folder of khutbahs, and I grabbed the khutbah, the title of it. I always title my khutbahs at the top of the paper, The Death of Umar bin Khattab. And I just said, you know what, this seems like the right thing to talk about at this point, and, there are a lot of similarities between the tragedy of Umar being stabbed in the masjid and, Muslims, being shot and murdered in the masjid. So it kind of just aligned. And I mean, of course, that was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't take any credit for that. That was totally divine inspiration. I had no control over that. But it aligned perfectly, to all the way down to Umar being, murdered in the masjid or being stabbed multiple times. There were 13 Sahaba that were stabbed along with Umar, by a non-Muslim who entered into a masjid, and took out a double-edged dagger and just began stabbing Muslims, as he's trying to make his way out of the masjid. And out of the 13 people that he stabbed, 7 of them died. 7 of the Sahaba died as a result of that. And Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anhu, although he didn't die immediately, eventually that stabbing was the eventual cause of his death, weeks later. And so, when you look at the situation, as I said in the khutbah, 2 things. One, we need to ask ourselves, did we set the precedent for this as Muslims? And what I mean by that is, when you think in the past, the sectarianism, Sunni, Shiite, Sufi, and all these different sects and groups that have fragmented and have separated the Muslim community, globally. And, the masjid bombings, there were incidents in Saudi Arabia, as early as last year where, a missile was fired from Yemen that, almost passed the border of Saudi Arabia. There was an incident in Saudi Arabia last year as well where a guy walked into a masjid on Jumu'ah and set off an explosive during Jumu'ah. And so you think to yourself as a Muslim, with multiple incidents like this happening amongst Muslims themselves, Have we set a precedent for non-Muslims to lose respect for the tradition or for the faith of Islam and for Muslims as a whole? Have we contributed to that? And we have to think about that, because there was a time when non-Muslims had nothing but the utmost respect and even some regard, fear of Muslims. And then you fast forward to today, where non-Muslims are looking from the outside, seeing Muslims, attacking one another, whether on a micro scale of, just backbiting and slandering and what you see going on the media, or on a macro level, where, you have sectarianism and, people, Muslims harming other Muslims. So, when people see that, and that was a comment that I made during the khutbah, that Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he regained consciousness, he sent Ibn Umar to go find out who was the one that was responsible for killing him. He sent Ibn Abbas to go find out who killed him. And the reason why Umar did that, because Umar was a self-reflective individual. And this is what I'm trying to get us to do as Muslims, to kind of take a step back and kind of reflect on ourselves and ask ourselves, how much have we contributed to the lack of respect and reverence that non-Muslims have for us? How much have we done to contribute to that? Because there's a spiritual element to this. This is not all physical. This is not all, fusaq, people, criminals who just want to create fasad fil ard, want to create, corruption in the earth. We also have to look at the spiritual component to that. And that is that when we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah instills fear in the hearts of others for us. The more we reverence God, the more we reverence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more Allah causes the creation to revere us. The more, you understand that there's a spiritual component to that. And that's where my mind goes. So when Ibn Abbas came back and he told Umar who was the guy that was responsible for killing him, it was a man by the name of Abu Lu'lu'a, Fayruz. And Umar said, I did nothing but enjoin good upon this man. Nonetheless, he said, all praise is due to Allah, who did not make my death at the hands of a person who claims to be a Muslim. Meaning, what are the implications of that comment? One is that it's expected of someone who is not a Muslim that if they decide to attack a Muslim, it's not something to be shocked or surprised by. When people don't share your faith, then there's a sense of insensitivity that could exist amongst people of differing faiths. And so therefore there is some room to expect things like that to happen from someone from another faith. The second thing is that when he said all praise is due to Allah, who did not make my death at the hands of a man who claims to be a Muslim, is that if Muslims turn their weapons on one another, or Muslims begin spilling the blood of other Muslims, then that means that people will actually lose respect for Islam. They will lose respect for Muslims. And this is the exact same statement that the Prophet ﷺ made when the hypocrite said that, Muhammad doesn't fear Allah. And Umar, radiallahu ta'ala, here again, in the same situation, Umar said, Ya Rasulullah, da'ni adrib unuq hada munafiq. He said, O Messenger of Allah, leave me to strike the neck of that hypocrite. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no. He said, La ya Umar, inni akhafu an yakul an-nas anna Muhammad yaqtulu ashaba. He said that I fear that people would say Muhammad kills his companions. So here another reference to the fact that as Muslims, there should be a level of reverence and respect that we have for one another, which will in turn transcend the Muslim community and begin to show the rest of the world that, hey, these people of this faith, they love one another, they revere one another, they respect one another. And, like any self-respecting person, when you respect yourself, you command that type of respect, if I could say that.
I think that the comparative analysis with Umar ibn Khattab's death, that's not even something that most of us don't even think about. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on. Moving forward, and I hope everybody I'm receiving you guys' questions, DMs. We're going to get to it. I want to let the Sheikh, I know everybody has a lot to say. We want to let the Sheikh lead us in this discussion. Please, I'm receiving the DMs, and I'm on WhatsApp. I get you guys questions, and for the second time, yes, if you ask a question out of it, we will make sure that that's taken care of. Okay, Sheikh, now, how should we respond? I mean, obviously you have a mixed emotions where you have fear, you have anger, some people have doubt. What, from your own personal opinion, what would you suggest how we as Muslims should respond? And number two, what is the prophetic way of responding to this type of a trauma and mass carnage, if you
will? So let's lead with what Islam says that we should do or how we should respond in a situation like this. You know, you ask yourself, you know, how did the Sahaba, obviously it's a little different when we try to look at, you know, an Islamic response to this, because when you look at the companions, you look at the Sahaba, you look at the Prophet ﷺ, that was an Islamic state, ruled and governed by Sharia, ruled and governed by Quran and Sunnah. We don't necessarily live in that type of climate, so therefore the way the Sahaba responded to violence against Muslims is not necessarily going to be the way that we can respond to violence against Muslims. However, what we can do is look at the general instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guard ourselves. As I said yesterday in a radio interview, we have in our religion what's called the fear prayer. All right, the fear prayer. And the fear prayer is a lot different than the normal prayer that we make. Just like when you're traveling, the salat changes a little bit. When you're sick, you know, there's certain things that you can do to your salat to make it a lot easier on you. So you can see that the prayer is there as a command, as an instruction, as a ritual. However, the prayer can change a little bit depending on the circumstance and situations of the Muslim and the situation that they find themselves in. All right, so the fear prayer, there is no sujood in the fear prayer because sujood is a very vulnerable position. When you go down into sujood, you think of a person that's in sujood, your forehead, your nose is on the ground. You know, you can't see what's going on behind you. You can't see what's going on the left of you or the right of you. So it's a very vulnerable situation a very vulnerable position to be in. And when you are in fear, Muslims are on the battlefield, or Muslims are, you know, retreating or whatever the case may be, advancing on an army or retreating from an army, and they're praying, and it's time for prayer. The prayer looks a little different. There is no sujood. The person prays exactly in the direction that they are facing without any sujood or ruku'. And that is to safeguard, to protect yourself. So as you can see that there are elements in our religion that, you know, that are put there, you know, to help us, you know, preserve our lives. And the fact of the matter is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Khudhu hidrakum," take your precautions. So there should be, you know, at this point, if there wasn't before, then there should be now in every mosque across the globe, there should be security measures put in place. And that is because our number one priority is preservation of life. Preservation of our lives as Muslims, as well as the lives of our neighbors. I remember reading an article related to the New Zealand incident where there was a neighbor who he said, I've lived next door to this mosque for years and Muslims are nothing but nice people. So let's just say we had a non-Muslim neighbor. We have a responsibility to protect them as well. Not just ourselves, preservation of life, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. And if you save a life, then it's as if you have saved the life of all mankind, because preservation of one life or protection of one life shows a general concern for all life. That's what that ayat means. And so it's not just preservation of the lives of Muslims that attend or mosque goers, but even our neighbors that live next door. You know, that's important. So I think moving forward, from an Islamic perspective, our response to this should be, you know, our number one priority, which is preservation of life, preservation of our lives, preservation of our religion, in that we're not going to cower. I like the post that you put out the other day about, you know, get out, put on your best, go to the mall. I was actually on my way to the mall, as a matter of fact. You understand? When I read your post, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. I'm not going to hide anywhere. You know what I mean? Yes, there was an incident that happened with the Muslim community just yesterday, and I am out and about. Full beard, my wife in full hijab, no fear, no unapologetically Muslim. You understand? I'm not running anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And even out and about, being nice to people and, carrying yourself as a Muslim, hey, how you doing? How's everything? And, believe it or not, the responses from non-Muslims, to this particular incident has been overwhelmingly positive. People have been sending messages. I think I was scrolling through Instagram. I see Drake was at his concert and he stopped his concert for a moment to, send his condolences to the family. You had, the Muslim rapper, what's his name? I'm forgetting his name. Kevin Gates, right? Right. I scrolled through something on Instagram and I saw him, extending his condolences. So, even popular stars and, rappers, musicians or people are all over, are stopping what they're doing, just pausing for a moment and just kind of being in that moment with Muslims, and this tragedy that happened. So, believe it or not, look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is working through these incidents. We see something as bad as Allah says in the Quran, تَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. That you know nothing but the outward, the external of this life, but Allah knows the internal and what's going on beyond this life, beyond the scope of what you can see. So while we see it as a tragedy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known, God is known for working through tragedies and turning them into triumphs. You understand? That's how God works. That's how he works. So, yeah, I think for us as Muslims, our response should be to carry on, not to cower, not to go in hiding, not to remove hijab. No, that's exactly what fear wants you to do. Because when we think about terrorism, the whole idea of terrorism is to instill fear. And we know that fear, the origin of it comes from shaitan. As Allah says in the Quran, يُخَوِّفُونَكَ بِالَّذِينَ مِن دُونِي, that shaitan tries to instill fear in you with other than God. So the whole idea of terrorism is to make you fear someone or something like you should fear God. But if you keep God the focus, my focus remains on fearing God, fearing Allah. I will never fear man or what God has given man the capability to do. Because the fact of the matter is that any terrorism, any act of terrorism, any terrorist, that any act that he is able or she is able to carry out is only by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are not the real power. God is. And if he gave you permission to do that, allowed you to do that, then it was for wisdom that is beyond what we can fathom or conceive as human beings. And I submit to that.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. As far as this is again, we're here, Sheikh Shadid Muhammad, Hanif J. Williams wanted to take some time out just to speak to our community. We know we are in a traumatic time. I think it's very important. This is our media. These media platforms we're using for our own self. It's our own voice. It's from us. I want to say wa alaikum assalam jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody. We're going to open up the Q&A in just here in a few minutes here. So please, we appreciate your patience, inshallah, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to bless you. And again, Sheikh Shadid, Hanif is here, Jay Williams. Sheikh Shadid, as far as what do you say to, the community of, if you had to speak, and maybe somebody from New Zealand, because one of my mentees is from New Zealand. What would you say to the community of New Zealand at this point? You being a scholar, you being one of the leaders of our community here in the West. What would you say to them in a moment like this?
You could have put a mountain on my shoulders, and it would have probably been easier for me to shoulder that. Believe it or not, I saw a clip yesterday, and they were actually calling the adhan at the same mosque where the incident took place. And that's what I would say. Continue to practice your religion. Nothing stops. You think after Sumayya was martyred, radiallahu ta'ala anha, you think the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba went into hiding? No, they had to. We still have to pray. We still have to fast. Ramadan is still around the corner. Like, our religion doesn't stop. You think when Umar was stabbed and Umar passed out, and fell unconscious in the masjid, what do you think the Sahaba did after he fell unconscious? They kept praying. He pulled Abdurrahman ibn Auf forward to finish leading the prayer, and while he laid on the ground. You understand? Islam still has to continue. What do you think the Sahaba did when the Prophet ﷺ died? Abu Bakr had to get on the minbar and said, "Man kana ya'budu Muhammadan fa inna Muhammadan qad mata, wa man kana ya'budu Allah fa inna Allah hayyun la yamut." That whoever used to worship Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. Meaning the mission of Islam continues on. It's not about the personality. It's not about the individual. We still have an obligation to God that never stops. وَاعْبُدُ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيَكَ الْيَقِينُ. Worship your Lord until death overtakes you. Death is not the end of our journey. It's the end of our human experience in this life. But our journey continues. It's not over with. So we're not going to stop practicing Islam. We're not going to close the mosque, stop calling the adhan, and begin to alter the way that we practice Islam because of a tragedy. And yes, we feel saddened. And I pray that each and every one of the Muslims who lost their lives, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept them as a shaheed. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts them with His mercy. Bi-rahmatihi. That Allah accepts them with His mercy as a shaheed, as they died on Friday. They died in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, what more could you ask for? Allahu Akbar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Do not think those who die in the cause of Allah as dead. بل أحياء, no, they are alive. عند ربهم يرزقون, with their Lord being provided for. Allah helps us to process these tragedies, these tragic events from a spiritual lens. They're not dead. They're probably feeling sorry for us that we got to stay here and deal with this. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir." That this dunya is a prison for the believer, and it is paradise for the disbeliever, for the unconscious of God. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's not. How many times does Allah say in the Quran, "La tahzan alayhim"? Don't grieve over them. In Jannah, there will be no grief or no fear. You know what I mean? La khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. No fear, no grief. Once you transcend this life, that's it. No more fear, no grief, no nothing. So while the only thing that we are responsible for at this point is kind of just wrestling with our emotions that were tied and attached to the family members of those who were martyred. The family members, that's just the natural emotion. I mean, whether they died being murdered in a mosque or they died in a car accident or they were going to leave this earth one way or another. So that particular emotion is human and we have to deal with that. Yes. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided for their last moments to be in this earth, all signs point to Jannah. All signs point to Jannah. As Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, أَنَّ الرَّجُلْ يَمُوتُ عَلَى مَا عَاشَ عَلَيْهِ وَيُبْعَثُ عَلَى مَا مَاتَ عَلَيْهِ. He said that a man in this life will die upon what he lived upon, and he will be resurrected upon what he died on. You understand? All signs point to Jannah. Nothing to grieve, nothing to fear.
Alhamdulillah, and like I said, I'm glad you brought the families. We ask Allah to grant them sabr and ayub, inshallah.
Ameen.
I want to say this before we open up the Q&A because we're at the 25-minute mark. I'm getting all you guys' questions. As far as justice, could you explain? I was telling one of my family members, I said, some of these things that are happening, some of these events, we have to wait till the day Yom Qiyamah to see our justice. We can't expect for this package deal to be sit down where we get justice here on the dunya, because there's a hereafter that we have to prepare for, and that's the day where Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to administer His justice. And yes, we do see some justice in this dunya, but what advice would you give to our community as far as looking at trying to balance and nuance this dunya? What would you respond to that?
But you were kind of breaking up a little bit. What was the question?
I said, how would you nuance and advise the people as far as waiting for justice here and balancing it off with the akhirah, with the hereafter?
Well, one of the things that, that we have, I don't know about New Zealand, I don't know about Australia, but here in America, when I think a lot of times when tragedies like this happens, we kind of just leave it to the courts and let them, just kind of deal with it, and the person is kind of sentenced and that's it. And the families, are just left to kind of grieve and work that out on their own. But there's actually civil suits. Even in Islam, when you spill the blood of someone, the family has to pay blood money for that. And we do have that in our court system here in America. There's civil suits that can be filed for the grief that the families have to experience. And while this person sits in jail for the rest of their lives, their families somebody has to be accountable for that. Somebody has to be responsible for that. We don't just say, okay, justice was served because he was given, a life sentence and justice was served. Justice was not served. Because this one man, took the lives of 51 people. You understand what I'm saying? Like, justice was not served because he got a life sentence. And in Islam, if you spill someone's blood, then that person or the family, the awliya of that person, has to be responsible for the blood money of the families of that. I'll give you an example. The Prophet ﷺ, he sent Khalid ibn Walid to go with a delegation to go call this particular tribe to Islam, Arab tribe, to call them to Islam. And when they got there, they spoke a different dialect than the Meccans, and the different dialect of Arabic than the Meccans. So when Khalid was superimposing on them to say La ilaha illallah, they were saying it wrong, and they didn't really understand what they were saying. And Khalid got frustrated. And because they were not pronouncing the Shahada correctly, or they wasn't pronouncing, it didn't seem like they were inclined towards pronouncing the Shahada, Khalid ibn Walid started executing them, started killing them. Until the Sahaba said to Khalid, no, we're not engaging in that. That's not the reason the Prophet ﷺ sent us here. He didn't send us here to exterminate a whole group of people because they will not pronounce the Shahada. And so the Sahaba, that was the only reason that Khalid stopped, because he saw the opposition of the delegation that was with him. When they got back to Medina, this is justice. When they got back to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ called all of the community together. And he stood in front of everyone and he said, Allahumma inni abra'u ilallahi bima fa'ala Khalid. He said, oh Allah, I am free in front of you for what Khalid did. I have nothing to do with what Khalid did. That's number one, severing your ties from the individual. Right? I have nothing to do with what he did. And then the Prophet ﷺ, every single individual that was murdered, the Prophet ﷺ paid the blood money to the families of those individuals to make up for what Khalid did. We don't just say, all right, he got 50 years in jail and we just, we're left to just grieve for the rest of our lives. No, file civil suits against the family, to file civil suits against the city. I mean, in a municipality, we are guaranteed protection. We're taxpayers. You understand? My protection is guaranteed. And we don't just let that go to waste. No, the family, and it's not even about the money, but it's to show that as Muslims, we have political power as well. You understand? We're working the system, using the system that was given to us. And that is our responsibility as Muslims. Not to be anti-government or anti-law or no. We are obligated as Muslims to utilize the system that has been given to us to establish justice to the best of that court system's ability. And just giving a guy 25 years to life and we're just left to just kind of roam, in our journey and, wallow in our emotions, while we process the murder, the heinous murder of our family members. No, la wallahi, somebody has to be accountable for that. Even the American government has, paid reparations, ironically, paid reparations to many of the Native Americans. Pay them reparations for what was done to them.
You see, if anyone can hear us, then that's fine. We apologize if there was any technical difficulties. We're going to start taking questions now, so you can put your questions simply in the chat, if you will. So please put your questions in there. Make sure your volume is all the way up. Yes, as well too. If you have any questions you want to ask the Sheikh, please put them in the comments there, and we will answer as many questions as we can. We're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. We're not going to be able to do it. If you can't hear anything, then try to just log off and come back.
Or they could go to my Periscope page. I'm actually streaming it live on Periscope as well, because I kind of figured that we might run into some problems. So I'm actually streaming it live on Periscope as well.
Okay, I'll put in the comments Periscope.
Shadid _M76 on Periscope. But even if they choose not to give out the reparations, it's the fact that we are able to garner that type of political clout. You understand? It's not even about the money. It's about showing, because understand how Westerners work. Westerners care about their money. You know, you hit them in their pockets, they understand how serious. You hit them in from the political, perspective, they understand how that works. Their politics, their money, that matters. And it shows the power that Muslims have, to, use, the political spectrum, or to use the legal system that has been given us to get the justice that we demand.
Yes. As far as the reverts, I'll let you be alone and raised Muslim. That's the question that's not really, I guess, it's out of curiosity.
Hanif, you kind of breaking up a little bit. It's going like in and out.
Somebody asked, "Are we both reverts?"
I don't understand what the relevance of that is, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand. I was born as Muslim, but I guess we're all reverts. But whatever. But we want to stick to the topic again. If anybody wants to have any questions you want to ask, please. Send in your questions relevant to the topic. If you have some Islam questions, we can take as well. It's not working anyway. I don't want to interrupt what they are saying. Thanks. You guys must be okay. That's fine. So, Sheikh, okay. As far as what did you tell your children? I mean, are they aware of this? I know you have some young ones too, but I know you have some of age as well. I mean, what was your how did you present this to them?
Well, my oldest three, they were pretty privy to it already. They have social media, so they were already aware. The discussion actually I had with them after Fajr this morning, believe it or not. And my discussion with them was exactly what I'm getting ready to say to you, word for word. I said, when you go into a masjid, don't ever put your back towards the door, the entrance. Sit against the wall. Sit somewhere where you can see the entire musalla, and be aware of the exits, all right? And be aware of your surroundings at all times. That was the conversation that I had.
I got a question here on WhatsApp, which is, can you please, Barakallahu ta'ala feet to the Sheikh, of course. And they said, what do you feel as far as armed guards outside of our places of worship?
Why not? I don't understand why that's I don't know about armed guards. Like, we don't want to create, the culture of the masjid, as you can see, even when the guy entered the masjid, before he did what he did, the Muslims greeted him at the door, and that's because our culture is one of mercy, compassion, peace. And we want to keep that culture, but we also want to, be vigilant, and protective over, the lives of the people that enter into the masjid. So I don't think necessarily we need armed guards, but if there are Muslim police officers if there are, Muslim security, that are, licensed to carry, there are Muslim, community members that are licensed to carry. I think that they need to be diligent in, making sure that the community remains protected. I think that when the Muslims are praying and go into sujood and ruku', I don't think that everybody should pray. I mean, even in the Prophet's masjid, when you go to Mecca and Medina, the guards outside the door, they don't pray with the jama'ah, if you notice. All right? You missing the Salatul Jama'ah for reasons of protecting the Jama'ah, you're going to get the same reward as those who prayed. So don't look at it as a loss. It's not a loss. But, somebody has to stand guard and make sure, that the Muslims that are in ruku' and sujood, that they are guarded, that they are protected. And I don't understand, why it took for this incident to happen, for these type of discussions to come out. This is something that should have been ongoing. But here in Delaware, in Masjid here, Ibrahim, there's a police officer that's outside that, kind of watches over the masjid while while the Jumu'ah services are being conducted. In Wilmington, you have Brother Fahim, you have the other brother, I'm forgetting his name right now, who are also, captains and police officers. So there are Muslim police officers that look after the Jama'ah. So alhamdulillah, I think here in Delaware, the community is, pretty on point with making sure the community is guarded. But for the other communities across America, I think this is a wake-up call, should be a wake-up call at this point, that we shouldn't take this lightly. We should not take this lightly, man. There should be not just, security. I'm talking about armed security, but there should also be cameras, all throughout the masajid. There should be cameras on the musalla. There should be cameras outside of the musalla, cameras in the parking lot, cameras everywhere. So that at least, we can get an idea of who the person is, the police. We can turn that information over to the police and they can do their job in finding out who the individual was. Not just for the purposes of harming Muslims, but even damaging the property of the masjid. There have been incidents in Philadelphia where pig heads were left in front of the mosque. I don't know if there were any camera footage that caught the person doing that, but, it does help making sure that we have cameras, we have, security, both in the form of cameras and in the form of armed individuals who are licensed to carry. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Ibrahim says, I pinned his question down there. I'm pretty sure you can see it, Sheikh. It's pinned right here in the chat. He says, how to, I best advise people that send around these videos of killing.
Okay, so let me that's an awesome question. Great question. Let me just say something to the Muslims who enjoy, because your feelings have been placated so much. Your desire to be entertained has been placated so much by living in this society that is just filled with entertainment. All right, you have Muslims today who enjoy looking at these videos, especially of Palestinians being murdered or being hurt or, things being done in Yemen or, and this recent event that was recorded. You have Muslims. The only thing that I could think of that would make a Muslim feel okay watching this, right? And then going on and to enjoy the rest of their day is the constant pampering with entertainment that you receive for living in this society. This is not a video game. These are real people losing their lives. This person decided to live stream this. And believe it or not, if he is communicating with anybody on the outside, I'm sure in his mind, he wants to know how many likes or how many shares or how many views he got on that video. And if he got no views on that video, no shares on that video, no repost of that video, how do you think that would affect his psyche? That nobody cared. You didn't entertain anybody. Nobody wanted to see it. Nobody wanted to be a part of it. But when you got people now, passing the video around, not just people, Muslims. How? I didn't even want to look at it. Period. Because that's exactly what he wanted. Why would you live stream? Why would you live stream murdering shooting 41 people Except that you are looking for some type of validation through the views and the likes of that video. And we gave it to him. As Muslims, we contributed to that. How do you feel? How do you meet your Lord, Yawm al-Qiyamah, knowing that you contributed to the trauma? Every time one of you Muslims look at that video, the views on the video increase. And every time the views on that video increase, you further validate the individual who did it, and you further humiliate the families of the people who were murdered. How do you feel as a Muslim? How can you meet your Lord with that? I don't even want to see it. Don't share it. Don't post it. Nothing. If there were 0 views on that, if there was 0 reposts and 0 shares, he would feel like a complete idiot because no one cared. But we have been, we have in our minds, man, subhanAllah, we love entertainment. I just want to see what happened. Okay, once you see what happened, don't you realize how that affects your psyche? How that affects your heart? Seeing people being murdered? Don't you see the eyes are the mirror to the heart? What part of that don't you understand? I don't understand how a Muslim could look at that and then share it and then carry on with the rest of your day like everything is okay, other than the fact that you have been desensitized through the constant entertainment due to the environment and the society that you live in. And that speaks volumes to where we are as Muslims, man. Really. So I would say that the person who shares that, you need to make tawbah. You should make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you should delete any attachments to that video. As a matter of fact, the Muslims should be reaching out to Google and to reach out to all of these social media networks to get the video removed. Because if it was a bunch of young white kids that was murdered at a school, you can bet your last dollar that that video would be removed. You can bet that last dollar that the parents and family members and community members of the slain individuals, they would have pressed upon Google or whatever social media outlet to remove the video entirely. No, not us Muslims. We want to look at it. We want to share it. We increase the views. Like, la ilaha illallah, how deceived are we?
The brother Jalil asked us here, he said that, what is the fiqh on retaliation? I guess he's talking about qisas and retaliation.
If you're not going to retaliate, then don't ask the question. And if you were going to retaliate, you wouldn't have asked the question. So moving on to the next question. Real bad boys move in silence. Nobody gets on social media and asks, how do we retaliate? If you were going to retaliate, you would have did it. Nobody's going to sit here and ask a question about that. What do you want me to say? Retaliate? Like, what type of setup question is that, man? Come on, man. Miss me with the nonsense, man.
Right. And Bashira says she's been following you for a long time. This is our message that we're getting in our DMs. Bashira says she's been following you for a long time. She appreciates your straight forwardness. She said, do you think we should stop talking about this or bringing attention to this?
No, we shouldn't stop talking about it because people need to heal from this. This is part of our healing process. Not talking about it is not going to make it go away. It's the same thing with slavery. It's like, all right, stop talking about slavery. No, we're dealing with generational trauma. You telling me to stop talking about it? No, this is the way we heal. It's like, well, why do we keep talking about it? Because this is the way that people process. You might process a lot differently. You might process by burying it and not talking about it and moving on and forgetting it and dismissing it. And there's some of us who don't have the luxury to do that. We don't just move past trauma by ignoring it. We talk it out. We share information. Perhaps somebody's going to say something that will make you say, you know what, I'm so glad you said that. That's exactly what I needed to hear. And they can move on. They can start on their journey to healing.
Sister Khadija asked, she said she really thanks you and how you speak about marriage and issues that are relevant in our Black community, especially. She is mentioning as far as self-defense classes. Are you an advocate of this?
I mean, do we have to ask about that? I mean, self-defense classes is not going to help you if you don't have heart. It doesn't matter. You can take 1,000,001 self-defense classes. You can go enroll in a karate class, enroll in a martial arts class. If you don't have heart, all of that means nothing. That's an art. Karate, martial arts, all of these are arts. It does not become real until it merges with a sound heart that pumps blood, not Kool-Aid. So if you're a coward, you're a coward. I don't care how much karate you know. It doesn't matter. And Islam doesn't necessarily require you to be skilled in the arts. Islam requires that you have heart and that you stand up against injustice, even if it means losing your life in the process. That's what that means. You can miss me with all of the martial arts and self-defense classes. If you ain't got no heart when you're confronted with a situation, all of that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean nothing. Same thing with a person who has a gun. If you have a gun and you scared to pull the trigger, you scared to raise the gun up at the person, you're going to shoot, your hand going to jump, you're going to miss the person standing right in front of you. You ever seen somebody lift a gun up at somebody and shoot and miss the person sitting right in front of them? Absolutely. It happens all the time. Because you're a coward. Even though you have a pistol in your hand, you're still a coward.
SubhanAllah. So Jihad asked, I believe it's Jihad. He asked in our chat, it's pinned right there for you, Sheikh. He just wants to know suggestions on making sure this event doesn't come yesterday's news. And we forget all about, like most of these types of news. So basically, he's just asking about how do we keep this relevant and educating and healing.
Well, I mean, not everybody is qualified to speak on the issue. I'm not necessarily qualified. I'm just answering as it comes to the best of my ability. You can agree or not agree. The only time that you are obligated to agree with anything is when I quote the Quran or I quote the Sunnah. If I quote my own personal, you're not necessarily obligated to agree with me, nor do I expect you to. This is just my perspective. Nonetheless, it does not become yesterday's news. That may not necessarily be that's not your issue. Maybe that's for somebody else to do. There have been videos that have been made. There have been articles that have been shared. People have, inked some things, have, pinned some things on the internet. And, if you could just take that and share it, you find a nice article written about the situation, nice detailed article. And I mean, in the days to come, you will see more information coming out and things like that. And just trying to keep the community abreast to what's going on. Reaching out to, brothers and sisters, in New Zealand or in Australia to find out if they're okay and things like that. That helps. And these type of situations should unify us. This should make us closer. To a lot of times we kind of concentrate on our own issues here in America, but we don't realize that a lot of the Muslims in the UK, a lot of the Muslims, especially the Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters in the UK, in Canada, and as well as, in Australia, believe it or not, a lot of them are experiencing a lot of the same things. My wife just told me this morning, there was a news reporter who, reported on the New Zealand incident, but also was driven to kind of expose that this is something that has been common even in the UK, in Britain, where many, few mosques there were a few more incidents that masjids have been shot up. However, the media is not giving them any attention. You know what I mean? So it might just help for us to extend, our hand to, because we don't live under monarchies. You know what I mean? We live in a democracy, so, quote unquote, a democracy. All right. Which means that we have certain freedoms and certain liberties that Muslims in other countries don't necessarily have. You know what I mean? You look at the Muslims that are in Britain and the UK, that's, they might boast of a democracy, but it's a monarchy. It's a monarchy, without a doubt. They don't have freedom of protest. They don't have some of the freedoms that we have here. So it might help if we would extend our hand, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that the Muslims, kajasadin wahid, is like one body. The Muslim ummah is like one body. When one part aches, the other part stays up with sleeplessness and, in fever. So meaning, we are affected by what goes on the other side of the world with Muslims. We are affected here. So it might help to just kind of extend, to the Muslims in those areas, to see if they're okay, if there's anything that we can do to assist here in America. Kind of breaking up.
I was just saying, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everybody in the chat. We just want to give our salam and give you your rights. Sister Miriam asked, she said that what are your thoughts as far as Muslims seeking clinical help? This does not necessarily, I'm not necessarily saying that we should abandon the Quran. Obviously, it's a shifa, a healing. But she said, what are your thoughts as far as seeking a clinical and psychological help with this?
If it's necessary, that's part of the means, the min the asbab. All right? Akhdul asbab. We have something in Islam that is called akhdul asbab, utilizing the means that have been, the resources that have been given to you. And if, mental health, wellness and clinicians that can administer, psychological help or mental health, abilities to help people deal with that, then that is part of the asbab. That is part of the resources that has been given to us. When we make dua for something, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, we also have to go after the means, the resources through which that dua will manifest. So simply making dua is not enough. If you ask Allah to heal your heart, heal your psyche, heal your mental, because you are going through something, having some type of mental crisis or mental, meltdown, then you making dua to Allah to heal that, part of that healing is you seeking out the means by which you can get your healing. And if that means going to a clinician, preferably a Muslim clinician, obviously, who's puts Islam at the center of their, clinical teachings, then that would be part of you going after the means to getting your dua answered. So yes, absolutely, I'm all for it.
Okay, again, this is Sister Aliyah. She asked, and again, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody. We're not going to get everybody the question. We're going to take two more questions because the Sheikh has to go. But Sister Aliyah says that, hold on, she said, this is not related, but I think it's an important question. She says, when is your conference?
It's a convention, not a conference. Big difference between the two. But this convention is the Islamic Leaders Convention that will take place in Washington, D.C., and that will be on Saturday, April 20th, and Sunday, April 21st, inshallah ta'ala. The flyer for that event is on my Facebook page as well as my Instagram page. At the bottom of the flyer, there's an email. At the bottom of the flyer, you can send an email in. And just so you know, I'm just going to put it out there just so people can know that the event will be taking place at Howard University. However, if you did not fill out an application, you're not going to be let in from the door. All right. There will be people at the door. You're not going to get in just saying, oh, I sent the email. Nobody responded. All emails have been responded to. All we're asking is for you to follow the protocol so that we are aware of who's coming, so we be aware of the contribution that you are bringing to the discussion, or whether or not you're just coming to take some information and bring it back to your community so that you can help out. But if you do not go through the application process, you are not going to be allowed entry into the facility. But this will be at Howard University, April 20th and April 21st, inshallah ta'ala. That's a Saturday and Sunday. There are hotels nearby. I will post hotels in the nearby area for those of you who are coming from out of town. And we have many people that are coming from Atlanta, from North Carolina, from South Carolina, alhamdulillah. And I will post on my Facebook page and Instagram page a list of hotels in the area, so you can kind of book your hotel now. That way you're in the area. And inshallah ta'ala, we're looking to have, a 2 days filled with information on top of information, so that we can go back and we can reconstruct our communities in a way where it's healthy and that it permeates, mental and social and spiritual, upliftment. That's what we're doing. We need to reconstruct these communities the way that they have been designed. The infrastructure has not been set up to, create an environment that would, allow us to live our best lives, allow us to, fulfill our potential as Muslims. So we want to kind of take another look at this. And even if it doesn't necessarily change the current administration of many masajid, at least the blueprint is there. And we're hoping that maybe our children, our grandchildren will kind of pick it up and they will have the resources by which they can implement that. But we need to do our part. Simply saying nothing is going to change, the masajid are not going to change, that's not enough. That's not enough. We are not responsible for the end result. We are responsible for doing the work. You understand? I'm not responsible for the end result. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responsible for the end result. Allah told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَمَا رَمَيْتْ إِذْ رَمَيْتْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. You didn't throw when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. Meaning the Prophet picked up the handful of dirt and threw it. That one little handful of dirt went into the eyes of 1,000 men of the non-Muslims that he was getting ready to attack. One handful went into the eyes of 1,000 people. So Allah told him, you didn't throw when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ did the work. The end result was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So us saying, well, that's not going to change. Masajid, this is not going to change. That's not your job. Your job may not be to change the game. But we are to put in the work and let the change happen as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees fit.
SubhanAllah, we are 30 seconds before ending this. We want to thank Sheikh Shadeed, everybody. Again, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to everybody. Sheikh, I appreciate you. You know I love you.
Alhamdulillah. أحبك الذي أحببتني له.
Allahumma ameen. Barakallah, Sheikh. So again, everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm going to keep this up so everybody can view it. And we are gone. And I appreciate everybody. Let us heal together. We ask for Jannah for those people who will pass. We consider shaheeds. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair.